Hello everyone, welcome to Fullmoon Movies. The Long Walk is not a film about action in the conventional sense. It's about endurance. Watching it today in 4K, the experience feels almost confrontational because the film refuses to distract you with spectacle. It asks you to stay with exhaustion, fear, and inevitability. Where many survival films rely on escalation, The Long Walk relies on subtraction, slowly stripping away strength, hope, and even identity step by step. At its core, the film places its characters in a situation that appears simple but is psychologically brutal. Keep walking or die. Now, there are no shortcuts, no clever solutions, no heroic rebellion that changes the rules. Now, this is important because the film is not interested in who is the strongest or smartest, but in who can endure meaninglessness the longest. Now, the war becomes a system, a rigid, merciless, and impersonal, and the characters are reduced to numbers long before they are reduced physically. Now, what makes the long walk unsettling is that the threat is not chaos but order. The rules are clear, the punishment is consistent, and that is precisely why it feels oppressive. There is no villain to confront in the traditional sense. The system does not hate the characters, it simply does not care. This creates a very different kind of tension, one rooted in inevitability rather than danger. The characters are not defined by elaborate backstories, instead, they reveal themselves through collapse. Conversations grow shorter, friendships form briefly and dissolve just as quickly. Compassion exists, but it becomes liability. Now, the film understands something deeply human. Prolonged pressure does not reveal heroism. In fact, it reveals limits. The characters are not weak, they are human, and the film never punishes them for that. Now, what lingers most is the absence of escape. There is no home to reach or no victory condition that restores dignity. Even survival feels hollow because the cost of surviving is witnessing the destruction of the others. Now, the war becomes a moral trap as much as a physical one. Every step forward is also a step away from empathy. Now, in this sense, The Long Walk is deeply reflective of the era it depicts and critiques. It mirrors societies where obedience is framed as participation, where endurance is mistaken for purpose, and where youth are tested not to grow but to be filtered. The characters are trapped in a future that feels eerily familiar, a world where systems reward compliance and call it opportunity. Now, watching the film in 4K Steelbook experiences becomes more intimate rather than more spectacular. The clarity enhances faces, fatigue, sweat, and the slow erosion of resolve. The image does not beautify the suffering, but it documents it. The restrained color palette, open roads, and empty horizons emphasize isolation rather than freedom. The steelbook presentation suits the film's tone, stark, unforgiving, and quietly oppressive. Now, when placing The Long Walk alongside with The Warriors, the contrast becomes a bit revealing as well. Now, both films are about movement, both follow characters who must keep going to survive. Both unfolds over a limited span of time where exhaustion compounds with every encounter, but that is where the similarities end. The Warriors is set in a late 1970s urban landscape, a fractured city filled with rival groups, chaos, and unpredictability. The threat in The Warriors comes from other people. The city is hostile, but it is alive. Survival depends on awareness, loyalty, and adaptability. Movement in The Warriors is tactical. There is a destination, home. Even if the home offers no guarantee of safety, it represents some kind of belonging. The Long Walk, by contrast, removes those chaos entirely. The environment is open, controlled, and stripped of distractions. Now, there are no rival factions, but there's also no territories to cross, no clever strategies to outmaneuver enemies. Now, the threat is time itself. Movement is not tactical, but it is compulsory. There is no home waiting at the end, only continuation of collapse. Now, period-wise, The Warrior reflects a moment of societal fragmentation where youth is pushed into tribal identity because institutions have failed them. The gangs exist because the city no longer offers structure or opportunity. The Long Walk reflects the opposite anxiety, a future where structure is absolute, where opportunity is just an illusion, and where systems decide worth through endurance rather than humanity. Now, emotionally, The Warriors allows for camaraderie to survive. Brotherhood is a shield. Even when characters fall, the group carries meaning forward. In The Long Walk, the camaraderie becomes dangerous. In fact, carrying too much accelerates breakdown. Isolation becomes a survival strategy. Now, this makes The Long Walk colder, more internal, and more existential. Now, this is interesting and this is my take. There is also a subtle layer of satire running beneath the long walk that becomes clearer the longer you sit with its rules. The strict time limitation for resting, which is the escalating verbal warnings at 90 seconds and 60 seconds and 30 seconds, followed by the execution when the clock reaches zero. Now, these are presented as a neutral procedure, almost bureaucratic. Yet, this mechanical countdown carries an uncomfortable historical echo. It mirrors the grim arithmetic often associated with the Vietnam War, where survival itself felt like a ticking clock, and where soldiers landing in the hostile territory knew that every passing minute statistically meant lost. Now, the walk structure, endurance measured against time, and life reduced to warning and numbers feels less like a pure dystopian fiction and more like a reflection of how war transforms human life into expendable units. Considering that Stephen King originally wrote the story under a different name and during a period shaped by Vietnam era anxieties, it's difficult not to read The Long Walk as carrying an implicit anti war message, not through protest or spectacle, but through repetition, attrition, and the quiet horror of watching young lives disappear according to the rules that claim fairness while delivering inevitability. By the time The Long Walk reaches its conclusion, there is no catharsis, only exhaustion, and that is intentional. The film refuses to comfort the audience because the world it depicts offers none. Now, this is not a story about rebellion or escape, it is a story about what happens when compliance becomes the only option left. Ultimately, The Long Walk stands apart as a film that uses simplicity as its weapon. It does not distract, entertain, or reassure. It observes, it waits, it walks with its characters until the audience feel the weight they carry. Now, in the 4K, the film does not feel modernized, it feels more closure, more unavoidable. And when placed alongside The Warriors, it becomes clear that while both films really explore survival through movement, they are responding to a very different fears of their time. One of that is about the chaos without the system, and the other is about system without mercy. Now, that contrast is what makes The Long Walk linger. It does not ask whether you can make it home. It asks whether the act of surviving under certain rules is worth the cost at all. Now, this movie is a must watch.